The other day, someone posted a comment about the great Satan. And when I asked them where the great Satan is in Scripture, they told me that God is the great Satan. And I don't think that they were talking in like a blatantly Satan worshiping kind of way, because I've heard people say this. I've heard this theory that God is Satan. So we're going to take a look at that in Scripture. First of all, God created everything. He created good and evil. Good and evil. And he is actually the one who sends destruction despite what is taught in counterfeit Christianity. Isaiah 45:7 says, I form the light and create darkness. I bring prosperity and create disaster. I, the Lord, do all these things. Does that equate to the Lord being Satan? Absolutely not. That's ridiculous. So let's look at some of the other things that are said. First of all, he is the one who will hand you over to the spirit you've chosen. You're making a decision here between good and evil. You're making a decision about who you're going to belong to, whose child you're going to be, which kingdom you're going to be a part of. And you do that based on the one you obey. And it's super easy to obey what Satan tells you to do, because that's normative in this world. It's very difficult to obey what God tells you to obey, because righteousness is a whole different standard, and you are in a condition that fights against the Spirit of God. But see, God wasn't going to make that easy, because he wants children who really have a heart for him, not those who are choosing him simply because he's the easy choice. God created evil. So why did he create evil? Because he's giving you a choice. Which one is it going to be? And also because he uses it in order to discipline, in order to punish. But he's not the one who is executing these things. He is the one commanding these things. He is the one who has created this. And so you can see the example in the story of Job, where God says, have you considered my servant Job? And then he sets the parameters by which Satan can mess with Job, essentially, because God, by the end of the chapter, we know that he has a plan. How do we know that? Because God says to Job, who is this who obscures my plans with words without knowledge? So he tells Job, I've had a plan in this whole time. In the book of James, we're told that God cannot be tempted by evil. And this is within the context of James saying, no one should say, well, why does God blame us? Who can resist his plan? I'm sorry, that was Paul who said that. In James, it was a similar situation that he was addressing. He was addressing the nature of sin. So he said, James said, no one should say God is tempting me. Okay, let's look it up specifically, because that's just the best way to do it. James 1, verse 13. When tempted, no one should say God is tempting me, for God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does he tempt anyone. But each person is tempted when they are dragged away by their own evil desire and enticed. So you already have here a statement in the Bible that says God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does he tempt anyone. You are tempted by your own evil desire and enticed. So that's not God doing that. At the end of Revelation, we're told that after the judgment, Satan is thrown into the lake of burning sulfur. So are we to understand now that God is the great Satan, which is never at all wording that is used in the Bible? That's ridiculous. As a matter of fact, God sort of mocks him and says he can carry him around on a string and put a hook in his jaw, and he will beg for mercy and promise to be his slave. Okay, so let's not even go there. So he's thrown into the lake of burning sulfur at the end of God using this thing that he has created in order to test the hearts and minds of his people and to punish the wicked. He is thrown into the lake of burning sulfur, and he'll never be again. Well, God was, is to come. He will be forever. There's no part of him that he's going to chunk off and throw into the lake of burning sulfur. There's no indication of that in Scripture. Every indication that this is not what God is doing, but what he is using. So maybe some people got tripped up on that and created their own doctrine. But if you're confused or you're stuck on something like, well, why did God create good and evil? You don't just get to go make up a doctrine about that. You go to the Word to answer the question for you. What it seems like is that people just bypassed sitting in the council of God and reading his word and said, well, here's the new doctrine. Also, at the end of the age, when those go up in the resurrection, the remnant goes up in the first resurrection, Satan is bound for 1,000 years. So do you mean to tell me that God binds himself in prison for 1,000 years and then unbinds himself to go out to the four corners of the earth and deceive those who go up in the second resurrection? I mean, this is really kind of lunacy and stupid and just is not fitting with the word. And I would say that the fact that anyone would call Satan great or refer to him as the great Satan is a big old indicator that this is a false doctrine informed by the spirit of Satan to make himself great, to exalt and elevate himself to some status that he just doesn't have. Even in the word, it says that people are going to look at him and go, is this the one that laid low the nations? Like with the implication, like, this is all you are? You made all that noise. You did all that, and this is it? So, again, like, this is something that I've said to you repeatedly. Satan does not have any power. To call him the great Satan is pretty, misinformed. He doesn't have any power but A, that which you give him, and B, that which God gives him. If you got to go ask someone for power or manipulate them or trick them into giving you power, you don't have power. You need that person more than they need you. To call that great is completely misinformed. I would have some other descriptors for that, like pathetic, desperate, dependent, without power. Not so great. That's how I would describe that. Well, I've come across the doctrine a couple times now. After this last time, I thought maybe it would be important to go and just blow it up. So there's the answer to that question from an actual biblical perspective. That's the only answer that matters. And I hope you'll take this to God and discern it.